We're up to part 2 of the Haggadah translation in English. And like we did by part 1, we're explaining the basics of the Haggadah, not with too many pirushim, just the basic Haggadah translation and a little bit of explanation to understand the flow of the Haggadah. And like we mentioned last time in part 1, is that in part 2 over here, we are up to now the main story of the Haggadah. And the Haggadah, like we mentioned also in the past, has a theme. And the Gemara says, Mathilim begnai umsamim b'shebah. You must begin in the storyline in a negative and then go up to in the praise, go up in the positive at the end of the story. We'll begin page 108 in the Shalom Yerushalayim Haggadah, and we begin with this paragraph Tsei Wilmad. Tsei Wilmad, go out and learn. Ma bikesh Laban ha'arami la'asol Yaakov Abinu. What did Laban Arami, what Laban Arami wanted to do to Yaakov Abinu? Sheparo lo gaza el ha'zecharim. For Paro only decreed the death sentence on the male. As we know that the Haggadah, the Torah tells us, Kol haben ha'yilod le'ora tashrichuhu. All the male babies, the baby boys that are born, you throw them in the water. Ve'Laban bikesh akol etakol. But we find that Laban wanted to uproot everything. Shene'emar, Arami obed abi. As it says, Arami, who is Laban, who came from Aram Naharaim, obed abi, tried to get rid of my father. Okay, we can pause for a second. And to understand it a little bit more, the Maharal explains that when it says Tsei Wilmad, why does it say Tsei Wilmad, go out and learn? Where should you go out to? And why are you choosing Laban Arami as a bad person? And you're making him worse than Paro? What's going on over here? So the Maharal explains that Tsei means go out of your camp, go out of your box. More than what Hashem, that we see Hashem doing for us, Hashem does for us what we don't see. Meaning, as much as we see the Hasdeh Hashem, the kindness of Hashem, as He protects us, there's more that He protects us which we don't see. Says about Haggadah, you think Hashem protected you. You think Hashem saved you from Paro, who was so evil? You have no clue how much He saved you from. Tsei Wilmad. When you step out of the Jewish camp a little bit and you see what the Goyim are planning to do to you, then you'll truly understand how much favors Hashem is doing for you. You want to know from where to begin? From Laban. Laban really technically is our grandfather, because Laban was the father of Rachel and Leah, and even Bilhah and Zilpah. So technically he's our grandfather. He was the father-in-law of Yaakov Abinu. And he tried to uproot everybody. And we would never have known about this if the Torah didn't tell us. Even Yaakov Abinu wouldn't have known if Laban didn't tell Yaakov that the night before he tried to attack Yaakov, Hashem came to Laban and warned him not to mess with Yaakov. It says it clearly in the Torah that Laban was chasing after Yaakov Abinu when he ran away in the end of Parashat Vayetzeh, and he wanted to uproot everybody. And the Torah says it clearly in Parashat Kitabo, Arami obed abi. He tried to kill us. So you think that only Paro Hashem saved us? Hashem saved us throughout all the generations. From where? From all the way in the beginning, from Laban ha'arami. Now the next part of the Haggadah is really the next part of the Pasuk, which is in Kitabo. And like we mentioned last time, in part 1, the Haggadah, the whole Haggadah is based on 3 to 4 Pesukim, Parashat Kitabo. And here's a continuation of the Pasuk. Vayered Mitzrayma vayagosham teme'at. And he went down to Mitzrayim, referring to Yaakov Abinu and his children, and he lived there with a small amount of people. Vahisham legogadol atzu v'rab. And Yaakov Abinu with his children, they were there. They became a great nation, strong and plenty. Now, this Pasuk will be explained throughout the Haggadah. The Haggadah will now bring each part of this Pasuk and explain it and prove its explanation from a different source in the Pasuk. Let's begin with the first part. Vayered Mitzrayim, he went down to Mitzrayim. Says the Haggadah, when he went down to Mitzrayim, it wasn't by choice, it was anus. He was forced to go down to Mitzrayim, api hadibur, because Hashem commanded to go there. Yaakov didn't want to go down to Mitzrayim. It's only because Yosef was there. It's only because there was a great hunger and Yosef felt that this is the place where his family would be protected from the hunger and he would take care of them. That's why Yaakov went down. The Hakamim even say differently. The Hakamim say, if it wasn't for Yosef HaTzadik being in Mitzrayim, Yaakov would have had to go down in chains. Anus, he had to, because there was a decree that Hashem had to fulfill. Next part of the pasuk says Vayagor Sham. The word Vayagor means over here to live, but in Hebrew we have another term also means Vayeshib, to settle. Both of them technically mean to live. What's the difference by Vayagor and Vayeshib? The shoresh, the source of the word, tells us the meaning. Vayagor comes from the word ger, a stranger, person who's not familiar with the place. Vayeshev means to settle and to sit down, to be part of the place. When Yaakov Abinu came down, he didn't come down to live there forever. They came with the intention, the whole family came with the intention of only settling there temporarily, just to get by. As it says, Vayagor Sham, says the Haggadah, Melamed, this teaches us, from this pasuk teaches us, Shelo yarad leishtakeah. Yaakov Abinu didn't plan to come and settle there and to sit over there, to dwell over there. Ela lagur sham, only to live there temporarily. Shneimar, how do we know? Because the pasuk says when the brothers came in Parashat Vayigash and they spoke to Paro, Vayomeru el Paro, the brothers told Paro, lagur ba'aretz banu. We only came here to live temporarily. Why? There's no sheep for your servants, because the hunger was very heavy in the land of Canaan where we lived. Therefore let us settle down in Eretz Goshen. That was the intent from the beginning. They didn't come down to live in Mitzrayim. They came down to just settle, just a little bit, just to sit a little bit. Next part of the pasuk says, that they came with a small number. How do I know? It says the Haggadah that they came in a small number. With only 70 people, your forefathers came down to Mitzrayim. It's a pasuk that's found, I believe, in Sefer Yeshua, where he was telling them, you came down to Mitzrayim with only 70 people, and now you number the number of the stars. You're so plenty. And you see clearly this pasuk telling you they only came down Shabbat Nefesh. And even Parashat Vayigash says that they came down only with 70 people, 70 souls, and the Torah lists them exactly who they were. You might think that what it says over there in the Torah, the names of the people who came down to Mitzrayim, these were the heads of the families. This other pasuk over here teaches us in Navi that this is really precise. It's exactly 70 people. It's not the names of the heads of the families like we find other places in the Torah. There was only 70 people. And if the pasuk continues in Parashat Kitavo, it says, Vahi Sham legoy gadol, they were there as a great nation. Now what does gadol mean over here? Gadol over here doesn't mean great in number, because we can see that that's the word varab. Says about like that, gadol means something great and awesome. Melamed, this pasuk teaches us, Shehayu Yisrael mitzuyanim sham, that they were there and they were a goy, they were a nation. They were a nation that was gadol, that was metzuyan, that was clearly distinguishable. And that's a Hakamim telling us. They tell us that the Jews were distinguishable in their own ways. There were 4 things that the Jews didn't change, and therefore that clearly made them become spotted and recognized amongst the nations. That this way they kept their identity. And what was the 4 things that the Jews kept their identity? The Hakamim tell us the Jews did not change their language. They didn't switch to speak Egyptian. They remained speaking their former language of Hebrew that they spoke in Eretz Canaan. Number 2, the Jews didn't change their names. On a simple sense, it means that the Jews kept their Jewish names. They didn't switch it to modern Egyptian day names. Number 3, the Jews did not intermarry. The Jews remained married only to their people, which is something very rare to find when a nation, goes completely to a different country, to a different place. They intermarry, they mingle, they spread, they become part of the other place, the nation, the host nation. The Jews didn't do that. And the 4th thing, the Jews did not change their clothing. If you would see a Jew, you would know it's a Jew from far, because you saw that he wore clothing that was clearly belonging to the Jewish nation. And that's what the Haggadah says. They goy gadol, they were a great nation. It doesn't mean great in number. We can see a great number later on. Mitzuyanim. Mitzuyan, tsiyun, is something that's found on top of a grave that shows us a mark what we call a tombstone, that you should know that there's a grave over here. That's called a tziyun. Mitzuyanim, it's highlighted. It sticks out. Kemoshe Nemar, how do I know that they were that way? Oh, I'm sorry. The pasuk continues, says they go gadol ve'atzum. And they're also very mighty, they were strong. How do I know? Kemoshe Nemar, pasuk says it right in the beginning, Parashat Shemot, Ubnei Yisrael paru vayishretzu. They were fruitful. They became many like the bugs, vayirbu, and they became plenty, vayatzmu bimod. They became very strong. V'tim maleh haaretz otam, and the earth filled them. But pasuk clearly says that Bnei Yisrael became atzum. They were very, very strong. Varab, and they also became very plenty. How do I know they became very plenty? Kemoshe ne'emar, pasuk says in Yehezkel, rebaba ketzemach hasadeh netatich. The prophet is speaking to the Jewish people, and he's comparing them to a living being, to living things, and he begins like this. And he says about the Jewish people, I've made you plenty. The greatest number in Hebrew, the largest number in Hebrew, is not trillionim, like we have in English. We have 10, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 100,000s, and then we have millions, billions, and trillions. Even in modern day Hebrew, where they have billionim and millionim, these are borrowed terms from English. In the biblical Hebrew, in the old Hebrew, the highest number that we find is above elef, and that is ribbo. Ribbo means 10,000. That's the highest number. Means, comes from the shores of Rav. So much. The highest is 10,000. So he says over here, rebaba, I made you plenty. Means the highest number possible. You became such a large number, like the tzemach of the sadeh, like the plants of the field. The plants of the field are, you can't count them, countless. That's how Netatich says in the Navi, that's how I made you, the Jewish people. V'terbi, and you became plenty. V'tigdali, became great. V'taboi ba'ad yadayim. Now the continuation of Pasuk says in Yehezkel, you've come to the point of maturity. What does it mean maturity? Physically maturing. That means you've hit puberty. V'shadayim nachonu. Now the Navi is comparing the Jewish nation to a girl that's maturing. Your breasts are showing, usarech sameach, and you're growing pubic hair. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means, the Hachamim tell us, that the Jewish nation has come to a point of maturity, that they're now becoming independent. A person, a child, a girl or a boy, when they hit maturity, they mentally now come to feel that they have to become independent. That's why they start rebelling against parents, because it's the point of maturity. They feel that they have to stand on their own. So the Jewish nation, when they became independent, means to say that they were pulled. The time came for them to be pulled out of Mitzrayim to become a nation. Says the pasuk, you're compared to a girl physically maturing. Shadayim nachonu usarek sameach, pubic hair. But says the pasuk, ve'at aron ve'ariyah, you were naked. What does it mean you were naked? Naked means over here, again, not physically, because this is all a mashal, this is all a parable. Naked over here means you're empty, you're naked of mitzvot. The Gemara says in Masechet Megillah, one who touches the cloth, the parchment of the Sefer Torah naked, will be buried naked. Says the Gemara, what do you mean naked? Says the Gemara, says, no, bare. If you touch it with your bare hands, you'll be buried naked. Says the Gemara, you'll be buried naked? What kind of punishment is that you're buried naked? So the Gemara explains that naked of mitzvot. And the Gemara goes on to explain naked of that mitzvah, meaning to say, you will not be enclosed with that mitzvah, that you don't have the merit of that mitzvah. Api Kabbalah, the Kabbalists explain that when a person does a mitzvah, the mitzvah becomes like a levush, like a garment that he wears, that he puts on. It dresses him. So when a person has no mitzvot, it's like he is naked. He's bare of that mitzvah. Ve'at iron ve'ariyah, says the pasuk, you're bare, you're naked. Ve'ariyah, and your whole body is showing. Meaning to say the Jews had no mitzvot when the time came for them to be leaving Mitzrayim, that the time came for the Exodus, they had no zechuyot that Hashem should be able to pull them out. And the Hachamim explained, and some people have this in their Haggadah, or we don't have it in this Haggadah over here, and they put the pasuk, and I've come to pass over you, says the pasuk later on, and I saw you rolling in your blood. Va'omar lach b'damai chayi, va'omar lach b'damai chayi. Pasuk that we also say by Brit Milah, because the pasuk says that you have been merited to have life b'damai, for your blood. What's the blood? It's plural. B'damai, two bloods. Dam shel milah v'dam shel pesach. The two bloods that gave the Jews a merit, a zechut, to get out of Mitzrayim, was the blood that they had from the Korban Pesach, which they put on the walls, and the dam of milah, and the blood of the circumcision that all men had to do in Mitzrayim before they were able to bring the Korban Pesach. Those two bloods gave the zechut. These are the two mitzvot that enclosed the Jewish people to give them the zechut that they should come out. Now that we finished explaining this pasuk and even elaborating on it a little bit more by bringing pesukim from different places in Nach, we go on to the second pasuk, which is the source of the Haggadah in Parashat Kitabo. And first we list the pasuk, we bring it down the Haggadah, and then the Haggadah goes on to explain each part of the pasuk. Let's read the pasuk first. Vayare'u otanu ha-Mitzrayim vayanunu. The Mitzrayim have done evil to us, and they inflicted us. They gave us anui. Veitenu alenu abra kasha, and they placed upon us difficult service. Now the Haggadah goes on to explain the first part. Vayare'u otanu ha-Mitzrayim. The Mitzrayim that have done evil to us. Meaning that true, you might look at history and find that Jewish people were enslaved. You might come to think, why were they enslaved? Because, listen, the Egyptian government wanted to make their country run faster. They wanted to industrialize the country. They wanted to, make Mitzrayim as a capital, as a place of money, as a great place of income, like they started by Yosef. And that's why they worked so hard. Happens to be they picked on them. Okay, but it wasn't for the intention of doing evil to the Jewish nation. It happens to be they found free labor. Says the pasuk, that's not true. They did it intentionally. They wanted to be evil to us. Shouldn't it, Imran? And we find the pasuk. What does it say in the pasuk right in the beginning of Parashat Shemot? The Paro and his advisors got together and they said, let's try to outsmart the Jewish people. We're scared that they may come too much in number. And what if there's a war that comes with Mitzrayim against another nation? And the Jewish nation might join our enemies. They're going to join our enemies and fight against us. And they're going to kick us out of the land. So that's why you see clearly that all the things that were done to the Jewish nation was done intentionally for the sake of making them suffer. Not just happened to be that they enslaved them. It was done vayare'u, with intention of doing evil to us. Ve'anunu, says the pasuk. Says the Haggadah, how do I know that they inflicted us? Look in Parashat Shemot. Ve'yasimu alav sareim misim. They placed special people, ministers, who were in charge of taking the taxes. Taxes can be paid through money or in paying your duties towards the government. What were these ministers appointed over? What were they to do? The intention was purely for one thing: make them suffer by making them have all the burden of carrying and building. Vayiben, with that suffering, Vayiben arem miskenot Pharaoh, the Jewish nation built cities of dwellings for Pharaoh. Et Pitom vet Ramses. Pitom, the cities of Pitom and the cities of Ramses. Next, the part of the pasuk says, "Veitenu aleinu avodah kasha." They put difficult work upon us. Like it says the pasuk, "Ve'abinu Mitzrayim v'nei Yisrael befarich." The Jewish nation was worked befarich, with heavy labor. As we explained by Karpas, that Karpas is the letter Samich Perich, which means heavy labor. And we explained that Perich can also be Perach, which is a mouth that's soft. And this Hachamim tell us, when we eat the maror, the preferable vegetable for maror is what we call chasse in Arabic, or hassa in Hebrew, or romaine lettuce. I says, what do you mean? It's not bitter. It's supposed to be maro bitter. It says, yeah, but it starts sweet and it becomes a little bit more bitter as you go up. Right? If you start eating from the bottom, it's very, very sweet. It starts becoming more bitter as you go up the stalk and the leaf of the romaine lettuce. To show us that's how the goyim came. They started with perach. Start with a soft mouth. Come, be part of us. We'll give you freedom. We'll give you a chance to build, to become part of society, to partake of society. And that's how they started it, which eventually turned into heavy slavery and abudah kasha. Next, we get to the third pasuk now. We get to the third pasuk that's found in Pasha Kitabo, which is again the basis of this Haggadah. And pasuk says, "V'nis'ak el Adonai Elohei avotenu." We now, in turn, out of the suffering that we went through, we started calling out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the God of our fathers. V'yishma Adonai et kolenu. Hashem heard our voices. V'yaret oneinu. He also saw our suffering. V'tamalenu, and our hard work. V'tlahatzenu, and the pressure that was upon us. And now the Haggadah goes on to explain this part of the pasuk. V'nis'ak el Adonai Elohei avotenu. We called out to Hashem, the God of our fathers. Like it says in the pasuk, how do you know we called out? Again in Parashat Shemot, V'hi bayamim harabim ahem. And when those long days that the Jews were in suffering, were in slavery, pasuk says, V'yamot melech Mitzrayim, the king of Mitzrayim died. V'ye'anehu b'nei Israel min ha'avodah v'yizaku. And the Jewish people grieved from the work that they had, and they called out. What does it mean they grieved? It means, they already couldn't handle it anymore. V'ta'al shav'atam ila Elohim min ha'avodah. And their calls, the cries came out, and they came up to Hashem from the work that they had. So this is